Live. Yeah, we in here doing live. All right, ready? Get it. 3, 2. Welcome to another episode of the Around the 412 Fantasy Football Show. I am Smitty. With me, as always, is Donnie Druin, my co-host. We are part of the Pod Hub Network, and we are part of AllSteelers.com. Donnie, what's going on?
Not a great day for me in terms of being a soccer fan, but other than that, I can't complain.
The other type of football.
Yeah, football. Nah, man, we're getting closer and closer to the season. Less than 3 weeks until the actual season kicks off. So I'm excited. This is ripe fantasy football season.
Who would have thought?
Not me.
I mean, seriously though, it's nice to have something like this to look forward to. You know, like getting the NHL back, getting the NBA back, and then having MLB come back. Obviously, still not having the fans involved and stuff like that, but like being able to play fantasy football this year, and it looks like the NFL is at least going to start on schedule. Like you said, less than a month. So counting down the weeks, counting down the days right now. Before we get into things, tell you guys about our sponsor, Keeks Barbershop. Keeks Barbershop is an old-fashioned barbershop. It's located at 180 Brighton Avenue in Rochester, PA. He's open 11 to 7 Tuesday through Friday and 9 to 4 on Saturday. And every Tuesday, he does $5 off for military personnel, first responders, and nurses. Again, Keeks Barbershop, 180 Brighton Avenue in Rochester, PA. So, last week we went through our top 10 quarterbacks and running backs. Meaning this week we're going to do wide receivers and tight ends. I don't know about you, but like top 5, super easy for me to get. Bottom 5, I think that we could have a good bit of differences. I mean, we'll see. But just when I was going through my list, I was like, wow, I'm kind of surprised this guy made my top 10.
Yeah, especially whenever it comes to the tight ends as well. I just feel like, every year it's just you have your cream of the crop tight ends and then everybody else. And, there's always going to be some shuffling whenever it comes to that. My wide receiver rankings, top 3, I definitely feel confident in. But like 4 through 10, like it's a dice roll for me. So I would welcome any opinion on those.
So I think you'll be surprised by my number 2. I will say that like my top 5, I think are definitely the top 5. It just depends on the order that you have them in. But yeah, I mean, let's find out. We'll start with the receivers. Kind of just jump right into it. My number 10 to match my QB 10 in Detroit, Kenny Golladay. I'm a big fan of Kenny Golladay. I have Matthew Stafford, like I said, as QB 10. His top weapon, wide receiver 10. I think that he's going to the opportunities are going to be ample there. This guy scored 11 touchdowns, had over 1,000 yards last year, and that was with having Matthew Stafford for was it half a season. I don't know. Did Matthew Stafford even play 8 games?
8 games. Yep.
8 games exactly. So exactly half the season. But still, he put up numbers when he was out as well. I'm a huge believer in Kenny Golladay. I think the return of Matthew Stafford obviously elevates his play even more. I think, a second-year TJ Hawkinson could take some work away. Obviously, Marvin Jones is still there. We'll see, what the situation is in the backfield, but I'm a huge Kenny Golladay fan. He comes in at wide receiver 10 for me.
Yeah, so I actually have Golladay ranked a little bit above 10, but I'm right there with you. He's a top
I wasn't sure if this guy was going to make your list, to be honest.
No, I really like Golladay, and for all the obvious reasons that you just listed. My wide receiver 10 might be a bit of a surprise. I'm going with Amari Cooper. So he finished as wide receiver 7 last year. I am expecting a little bit of a drop off just with Dallas, adding CeeDee Lamb. But then again, they are going to more of an aggressive passing attack as far as offense goes. Amari Cooper is one of the best route runners in the game. He's proven that time and time again. His hands might be a little bit inconsistent at times, but I just feel like he's still, regardless of how good Michael Gallup is, regardless of how good CeeDee Lamb can be, Amari Cooper is still going to be the number 1 receiving option when it comes to Dallas. And, if Dallas is going to throw the ball like everybody suggests they are, then Cooper's just going to put up amazing numbers again this year.
Yeah, Cooper's a guy that I highly considered at 10 exactly. Didn't make the cut for me for the reason that you just said. I feel like, the emergence of Michael Gallup kind of last year and now the addition of CeeDee Lamb. I just, I don't know. I mean, you are to see a little bit of a drop off, I think, an opportunity, but I still think he's going to be a productive guy. This is a guy that probably would be like my wide receiver 11 or 12. So just missing the cut. So I still really like Amari Cooper. As you mentioned, we are hearing very good things about CeeDee Lamb out of Dallas's training camp, but we know the rapport that Dak and Amari Cooper have already. Right. So, and we know that translates to the games that are going to be played on Sundays. So, yeah, I mean, I have no problem with Amari Cooper being your number 10. As I said, he's just outside mine.
Yeah.
Okay, so going on to number 9. So, it's all about opportunity for me. This guy, Adam Thielen in Minnesota, is my wide receiver 9. The opportunity is going to be too great with the loss of Stephon Diggs, the trade him going to Buffalo. They did add Justin Jefferson in the first round of this draft. It would be interesting to see how quickly he gets acclimated to that offense. He did spend some time early on the COVID list. I do think that we see a little bit of a second-year jump in Irv Smith Jr. as well to take some of that, the targets their way. I just think that Adam Thielen, you just mentioned, really good route runners. This guy wins in a lot of ways. He can play inside, he can play out. And I just think that the opportunity is going to be too great in Minnesota with, Stephon Diggs moving on to Buffalo. So, yeah, this is a guy that, he could be up there in terms of top of the NFL in targets, in my opinion.
Absolutely. And the same way you feel about Amari Cooper is the same way I feel about Adam Thielen. I feel like Adam Thielen would probably be my wide receiver 11. I had a really hard time trying to decide my guy at number 10 just because there's so many guys like Amari Cooper, like Adam Thielen. I agree with everything you just said. The opportunity is going to be there for sure. Adam Thielen can, do it in multiple facets when it comes to, receiving and route running and all that good stuff. So I'm right there with you. I'm not sure how you feel about this guy at number 9. I have Odell Beckham Jr. as my wide receiver number 9. And, every week I bring this up on the show, but if we expect Cleveland's offense to have a sort of revival and we expect them to get the gears going again, a big part of that is going to be Odell Beckham Jr. Number 1, staying healthy, and number 2, actually going out and, proving that he can do what he's done year in and year out. He had a groin. I'm not sure if it was like a hernia or like a groin injury last year, but he was hindered by something last year. He got that taken care of. All that stuff's behind him. In an offense where Austin Hooper is a new addition, Jarvis Landry is still there as well. You have Kareem Hunt and Nick Chubb going out the backfield. There's a lot of options, a lot of ways the ball can be spread out there in Cleveland. But at the end of the day, Baker Mayfield, when it comes down to it, is going to rely on his playmaker, and that playmaker is Odell Beckham Jr. I have notes for all my guys on my top 10, just like talking points and stuff. All I have written down for Odell is we know how talented he is. And, I just think if he's healthy, he's going to put up the numbers.
So my wide receiver 8, Odell Beckham Jr. No, I do. As we talked about every week with Cleveland, like on paper, it's there. It has to translate to the game. But on paper, that offense should be one of the best in the NFL. And it's all about Baker Mayfield. It's about protecting Baker Mayfield. And they feel like they've done that this offseason. Bringing in Jack Conklin, going ahead and using their first-round pick on Jedrick Wills. One of those guys, and it's probably going to be Jedrick Wills. I'm not sure what's going on. I really haven't paid attention much to Browns training camp, to be honest with you. I assume Jedrick Wills is going to open the year at left tackle. And he played right tackle at Alabama. So, that transition probably won't be seamless, but it's going to be better than what they got from that position last year. And if they protect Baker, this is a big year for him. He's got to earn a new contract. He's got to, help. Well, first off, he has to help himself just to even get a 5th-year option picked up, but that's going to happen. It's more about, getting the extension, maybe not even having to play on that 5th-year option. He's got to ball out this year, and Odell Beckham Jr., as you mentioned, there's a lot of guys in that offense that he can throw to. When push comes to shove, Odell Beckham Jr. is the clear-cut number 1 option in that passing game. You mentioned the injuries last year. He still had 1,000 yards receiving. I think if he sees an uptick in touchdown receptions, say he catches, 8 to 10, this guy's going to be inside the top 10 in fantasy.
Oh, absolutely. And I like your point about Baker Mayfield as well. We've seen his rookie year, flashes of brilliance he's had. We've seen the last couple of years where he hasn't been so great, but he still kind of displayed that he could be a franchise quarterback. Now's the year you need to produce, Baker. There's no more waiting. You need to start putting numbers and W's up in the win column right now here in 2020. So we'll see if he does that. And if he wants to do that, he should probably throw the ball to one of the most athletic receivers we've ever seen play the game in Odell. My wide receiver, number 8, is going to be Allen Robinson. So I went back and I looked at his numbers. And for whatever reason, whenever I think of Robinson in 2019, I don't think of him having a great year. Just because of, Mitch Trubisky having him, throwing the ball to him. He got 98 passes on 154 targets. I had about 1,100 yards, 7 touchdowns. Not a terrible year. I think you would take that guaranteed from any one of your fantasy receivers. Nick Foles is in the picture now. I do think he will be the starting quarterback, if not all the season, the majority of the season. Taylor Gabriel is out of the picture. That'll free up a couple of targets for Allen Robinson. I just feel like Robinson is one of the most underrated guys in terms of, play style and receiving. And granted, even with a terrible quarterback, he still puts up the numbers. So if Nick Foles can be any better than Trubisky, I really like Robinson's chances of getting in the top 10.
I love Allen Robinson. I wish that he got more consistent QB play. I mean, look at his entire career. It's been inconsistent QB play. This is a guy that's, popular, though, to finish inside the top 10 in fantasy this year. And I don't know if it's a lot of people like you believing, the move to Nick Foles, if that should be what they choose to do, steadies the QB play there, and that's how it plays out for him. But Allen Robinson, just himself, I do think is one of the more underrated receivers in the NFL. So, if he gets consistent QB play this year, I see no reason that he shouldn't be inside the top 10 because he himself, I do believe, is a top 10 talent.
No, you hit the nail on the head. There's a lot of Allen Robinson truthers out there. I wouldn't consider myself one, but damn, if you put up those kind of numbers with Trubisky throwing you the ball, you got to be somewhat good.
Yeah. Okay, so my wide receiver 7 then, guy that finished in the top 5 last year, and this could potentially surprise some people because of the QB play. Cooper Kupp is my wide receiver 7. Brandon Cooks leaving doesn't really play a huge part in that for me. There are some targets there that are going to be vacant, and you wonder where they could go. They drafted, what's his name? Out of Van Jefferson is there now. He potentially could take those targets that Brandon Cooks had. But, I mean, if Cooper Kupp has the exact same year he did last year, as I just mentioned, he finished in the top 5. And that was with pretty inconsistent QB play going back to what we just talked about in Chicago from Jared Goff last year, who did not have a very good year. So, if he kind of finds the form, the 2018 Goff going into 2020, Cooper Kupp, is a guy that should finish right around the top 7, especially in PPR formats. This guy, he does his work primarily in the slot. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how those targets are divvied up. Not that Brandon Cooks was on the field a lot last year anyway. He dealt with a lot of injuries. But the Rams offense, obviously, as any offense goes through the quarterback, so it's all about Jared Goff. But if Jared Goff gives them consistent QB play, I see no reason Cooper Kupp isn't, a top 7 option.
No, exactly. And for as much as we talk about the Chiefs offense, and not to equate these two, but, I feel like if you have anybody in the Rams offense, they're still going to put up somewhat decent numbers, whether it be Cooper Kupp, whether it be Robert Woods, Tyler Higbee, Gerald Everett, Gerald Henderson, Todd Gurley, whoever's in that offense. I feel like they're going to put up somewhat decent numbers no matter what. I didn't have Cooper Kupp in my top 10, and, that's probably a little bit controversial. It just depends on how you feel about him. He really slowed down in the second half of the season last year, kind of giving me cold
Pittsburgh broke him.
Yeah, no, Steven Nelson. But no, him slowing down just really gave me cold feet heading into 2020. I understand why people are really high on him. I mean, he's a target machine. Regardless of what the score is, the Rams are going to be Sean McVay are going to be throwing the ball left and right. So I think there's a lot of room for production there, but I just don't think he can keep up what he did in the first half of 2019. Wide receiver 7, you already talked about him for me, but I'll go and speak on him a little bit more. Kenny Golladay, the Golladay and Express, my wide receivers at 7 heading to 2020. Number 1 option in the Lions offense that gets back Matthew Stafford. Stafford puts up dumb numbers whenever he's healthy. This is all banking on Stafford, returning healthy. And we even saw it, even with Stafford only in for half the season, Golladay still put up quality numbers. In the 8 games that Matthew Stafford played last year, 4 of them, Kenny Golladay scored more than 23 fantasy points in the game. You really got to like that connection. And granted, there are other options. And if we're being truthful, I like Marvin Jones' ADP over a guy like Kenny Golladay. It's just in terms of production where you can draft him at. You have a guy like not Kenny Golladay. Wow, Kerryon Johnson in the backfield. They just drafted DeAndre Swift. They have T.J. Hawkinson. So there's a couple mouth to feed out there in Detroit. But Kenny Golladay has far and away established himself as Matthew Stafford's #1 passing target.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I love Kenny Golladay. I talked about him when I put him at number 10, but yeah, I don't have much else to add there other than that. So moving along, my wide receiver 6, we're going down to Tampa with not Mike Evans, Chris Godwin. We talked about, Tom Brady being the quarterback there. Who does that favor more in that receiving game? And I think it's Chris Godwin, a guy that works very well in the slot. He can play outside too, but he works very well in the slot. That's where Tom Brady does his best work, targeting guys, is in the slot. So I think if there's a guy that's going to have the same ceiling, because we talked about it with Tampa Bay's offense, maybe it won't be as boom as bust as last year with Jameis Winston under center, but that boom was very boom. So I think if you're looking at like the ceiling of these guys, the floor of these guys, I think Chris Godwin has a much safer floor than Mike Evans in this offense led by Tom Brady, just because of the way that he operates. And I love Chris Godwin. I think you could even, regardless of who's under center, could make the case that he would be the receiver drone in Tampa Bay personally, but that's just me. I had a lot of trouble keeping this guy outside of my top 5, being that I'm a huge Chris Godwin fan. But yeah, I mean, my wide receiver 6, I think that his role in that offense pretty much stays the same, even with the transition from Winston to Brady.
So our top 5s are different because I do have Godwin in my top 5, and you do have him a little bit out.
I know who it's going to be, to be honest, and I have him very high.
Who? My number 6 or?
No. I know what the difference is going to be in our top 5. Okay. But let's hear who your number 6 is.
No, you're good. Number 6, I have DeAndre Hopkins as my number 6 receiver. Okay. Yeah, a bit of. You're good. So in a Cliff Kingsbury offense where they're going to pass, probably all 3 downs, David Johnson isn't there in Arizona to take away the targets out of the backfield. Kenyon Drake can catch the ball, but I'm not too worried about him. You have aging Larry Fitzgerald and up Christian Kirk. And it's just like 7 receivers that they drafted last year in the draft.
And Isabel is there. Yeah.
Oh yeah. So there's some names in the Arizona receiving depth chart. None of them come close to touching DeAndre Hopkins. I think he'll far and away be the best receiver in Arizona this year. So yeah, he's going from one young talented quarterback in Deshaun Watson to another young and talented quarterback in Kyler Murray. We've seen DeAndre put up numbers, and for a large portion just because he's not necessarily force feeding the ball, but just because he was open all the time. I do expect that to continue in Arizona. My only concern for DeAndre, though, and why I do have him lower than some people do, is I think, in my opinion, it relies entirely on the progression of Kyler Murray. And Kyler, kind of perfecting, his pocket passing a little bit, polishing himself more as a passer as opposed to a runner. He's an athlete at the quarterback position, don't get me wrong. But if Arizona wants to go places in the postseason and want to put up 11, 12, 13 wins in a regular season, he's going to have to become more of a refined passer. So if that happens, and I do think that has a good chance of happening in 2020, DeAndre Hopkins is going to eat in 2020.
Yeah, he's my wide receiver 5. So, I mean, kind of right there. And the reason that I have him at 5 and not higher, a lot of the reasons you just mentioned. Arizona's offensive line, not great. You got to protect Kyler to help him be a pocket passer, as you just mentioned. But yeah, it's about Kyler taking the next step. Also, there's a few more mouths to feed, in my opinion. DeAndre was the clear-cut alpha in Houston. I think he still is in Arizona, but I think the supporting cast in Arizona is a little bit better than it was in Houston. And I think that those guys will take a little bit more targets away than what he was getting taken away from him in Houston. But yeah, going from Deshaun Watson to Kyler Murray, a guy that a lot of people would love to build their franchise around versus the guy that a lot of people would take to build their franchise around right now, if you were asking them. So, I mean, I still love DeAndre Hopkins. This isn't about him, the player. I still think he's going to have a fantastic year. I just think that, there's 4 guys in front of him just because of looking at their supporting cast there.
No, you're right in all of your assessments. So I might surprise you with my number 5 because I don't know how high you have him. Tyreek Hill is my wide receiver 5. heading to 2020. I couldn't leave him outside the top 5. Just the ability to put up 40-point fantasy weeks on any given week, it is such a valued commodity. When you have a guy like Patrick Mahomes throwing the ball, and Mahomes can sling it 70 easy, and Tyreek Hill can run by anybody and catch a 70-yard touchdown super easy. So you put those two things together, you have one of the most successful quarterback wide receiver duos, not only fantasy but in actual football as well. CEH is there, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Travis Kelce is there, McCole Hardman's supposed to have a bigger role in 2020. Sammy Watkins is returning. I do understand there's a lot of mouths to feed, but Tyreek Hill is just a go-to guy. And granted, he only gets about like 7 targets a game, but he capitalizes on most of them. So I feel like Tyreek Hill is probably the most boom or bust guy in my top 5, just because there's going to be weeks where he's only going to get you 10 points, where he's only going to get you 12 or 14. But the weeks he'll get you 30 or 40 are much, much higher of that having a better chance to like have that happen, as opposed to him having a down week. So, his speed's untouchable. He plays in the best offense in the league, and I just feel like he's a top 5 receiver for a reason.
Yeah, I mean, I'll talk about him a little bit more here in a little bit, but it's not time for me to talk about him yet because Julio Jones is my wide receiver 4. The only reason that I don't have him as high, it's all about opportunity, right? And this is an offense that I expect Calvin Ridley to take a leap in this year. I think Calvin Ridley himself could flirt with top 15 consideration. And for that reason, I think that Julio Jones doesn't finish in the top 3, and that's not a knock on him. It's more so the other guys just being such alphas in terms of what their offense does, or potentially, a guy that you just talked about, which with me revealing Julio is my number 4, clearly Tyreek Hill is going to be my top 3. So I'll talk about him in a little bit, but just as far as Julio Jones goes, still love him. Still think he's a clear-cut wide receiver 1. I just think with the additions of, Hayden Hurst in that offense, curious to see how they use Todd Gurley and also the emergence of Calvin Ridley this year, that there's, 3 guys that I would put ahead of him from fantasy perspective.
Absolutely. Yeah, I do have Julio in my top 3, but it's not like there's some big discrepancy, just in terms of where we have them ranked. So I definitely see eye to eye with you there. My number 4 is a guy you've already talked about, Chris Godwin. I don't consider myself like a Chris Godwin truther, but like you just can't ignore the numbers he put up last year. And granted, that was with Jameis Winston throwing him the ball. But Tom Brady loves his slot receivers. I think Tom Brady averaged about 10 yards per target last year. Chris Godwin ran about 7.8 yards per route last year, whereas Mike Evans hit about like 15. So Tom Brady, while he's not slinging it 60 yards anymore, he's definitely going to be looking more of like the middle of the field. He's not going to be powering balls to the sideline. We've seen his connection with Julian Edelman, how powerful that's been, and I think that'll carry over to Tampa Bay. I think Chris Godwin is probably one of the better slot receivers in the game. I feel like he's had more yards ran out of the slot, second only to Cooper Kupp last year, if I remember correctly. The numbers for Godwin are insane. I don't foresee, kind of like you alluded to, I don't see Tampa Bay's offense just boom or busting every week. But I think it'll be a little bit more stable. But Chris Godwin's one of those guys where, as long as Tom Brady continues his trend of favoriting slot receivers, Chris Godwin's going to continue to eat like he did in 2019. I feel like, if anything, Mike Evans's floor and ceiling is kind of impacted by Brady going there instead of Jameis Winston throwing the ball.
Yeah. I mean, I already spoke my piece on Chris Godwin. I definitely, think that he's worthy of top 5 consideration. He just outside for me. But my number 3, Tyreek Hill. You just talked about him. At best, he's clearly going to be the number 1 receiver each week. At worst, he puts up, wide receiver 2 numbers. But you will take that in a guy because, that boom or bust where the boom is so high and or not even boom or bust, just that ceiling being so high and that floor, at worst, like I said, you're getting wide receiver 2 production. It's too good to pass up. I mean, he only needs to make one play. This is, one of the true home run hitters at the wide receiver position. You could throw him a screen pass on the 1 yard line and you never know, he could turn into a 99-yard touchdown. So get the ball in his hands, let him work. And to me, this is just a guy that far more often will put up those 20-plus point weeks as opposed to putting up 10 or under. So wide receiver 3 for me.
Yeah, absolutely. And like we talked about earlier, you're drafting Tyreek Hill for that, the greater chance to hit that 40-point week, to hit that 50-point week in your fantasy leagues. If any receiver is going to hit, it's probably going to be Tyreek Hill more oftentimes than not. I've already put my 2 cents in Tyreek, so I'm not going to keep preaching. But wide receiver 3 for me is Julio Jones. I completely understand why you have him outside the top 3, but for me, he's still the most talented receiver in the game. Calvin Ridley being there does hurt him a little bit. I will say that. We'll see with Hayden Hurst. I'm a Hayden Hurst believer, no doubt, and you'll see that reflected in my tight end rankings when we talk about that a little bit later. But just for me, Julio Jones has the capability to put up those monster 40, 50-point weeks, but also at the same time remains one of the most consistent receivers in the game. He just doesn't score touchdowns. He's only had 1 season where he scored over double-digit touchdowns. He just doesn't get in the end zone a lot. But I think that speaks more to how good of a receiver he is, inside of the goal lines. Granted, he doesn't score, but he still gets you those 20, 25-point games more oftentimes than not. So Julio Jones, just a monster. He's a ball magnet. Matt Ryan is going to go to him more times than not. And, yeah, he's my wide receiver 3 for pretty good reason.
Yeah, I mean, it's all about the red zone targets, and that's just going to be interesting. Does he get more red zone targets now going from Austin Hooper to Hayden Hurst?
Yeah.
But with it being the first year of Hayden Hurst, could we see Julio Jones end up being like that red zone target machine? But yeah, I mean, obviously, I love Julio. Talked about him being my wide receiver 4, but have no issue with where you have him as well. So I thought that this would actually be the guy we didn't share in the top 5, but as we're winding down here, maybe he is, unless he's just completely not in your top 10.
Oh no, he is.
Devontae Adams is my wide receiver 2. Getting back to opportunity, who the hell else is going to catch balls for the Green Bay Packers?
Nobody.
I mean, he stays healthy. You got Aaron Rodgers, a pissed off Aaron Rodgers, coming into the season with a chip on his shoulder after they decided to draft a quarterback and running back rounds 1 and 2 for whatever reason at Jade Shavink. But the opportunity is too great. This is a very talented guy. I feel like a little bit of an underrated route runner because, he's definitely in my top 5 route runners in the league. If you don't have him there, I don't see how. But yeah, he's always open, even though there's not another guy on the other side of him. And yeah, he's going to catch 15 plus touchdown passes this year because I don't know who else is going to be catching them.
No, right. Even if there's a guy across from him, he's always 7-Eleven. He's always open, Just get him the ball. I would throw him the ball in triple coverage. I would give him the Calvin Johnson treatment 11 out of 10 times. Devontae Adams obviously is my wide receiver 2 heading to 2020. Like you alluded to, Green Bay added nobody new in 2019, 2020 offseason heading into this year. His target share is enormous. I think it's at like 30% or like something like that. Absolutely bonkers when it comes to fantasy production, fantasy value, and opportunity. The injury history does concern me a little bit. There's always kind of like something nagging him. But, when you're drafting, you have to assume all your players are going to stay healthy. And, Devontae Adams, I feel like at worst is probably receiver 4, and that's on a very, very bad day. So Devontae Adams, gets it done every facet of the game. He can catch the ball at the goal line. He can take it 80, 70 yards for a touchdown. Doesn't matter where you throw it to him. He's going to catch it, and he's my wide receiver 2.
Yeah, if you're considering like not drafting a guy because of past injury history, yeah, don't even like bother thinking about taking that guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's nothing you can do about it. There's no control over it. You have no idea what's going to happen. It's obviously disappointing when it happens, but yeah, that should not play into your draft selection of a guy, in my opinion, at least. But yeah, like who else? I mean, you have they tried to bring in Devin Funchess, and not that would have added anything anyway, really. But he opted out of the season. So you have Allen Lazard, who showed a little bit of flashes last year. Equanimeous St. Brown, Marquez Valdez-Scantling, Malik Turner, and then you have the tight ends.
Yeah, I heard Devontae Adams, and the rest is what I just heard.
I like Jace Sternberger is a guy that in year 2 I think people are expecting a little bit from at the tight end position, but we know how Green Bay is with tight ends, so yeah, I got to see it to believe it. That brings us to wide receiver 1. We got the same guy there. Michael Thomas, he had a historic year last year, way too many targets, and I understand that they added Emmanuel Sanders, but that offense goes through Michael Thomas, what he does in the short to intermediate game. He's going to catch 120 passes. He's going to be targeted 160 times. Who knows numbers? The only thing is, he doesn't catch the 25 plus yard passes. I know there's leagues that have like incentives for that and stuff like that, but still, clear cut, he was wide receiver one last year. Kind of goes back to having Christian McCaffrey at running back number one, as we both had last week. Somebody else has to unseat him this year because he has to come into the year as your number one at the position just because of what he did last year.
Right, and I'll touch what you touched on a little bit. I do understand that Emmanuel Sanders is now in New Orleans. That will play a factor in some things. Jared Cook is expected to have a little bit of a bigger role in the offense. I do understand that. Alvin Kamara should return, some of that touchdown production that we saw 2 years ago. So the law of averages kind of say that Michael Thomas won't have the year he had last year. That I do expect him to take a little bit of a statistical drop. But that still leaves him at wide receiver one for me. I mean, the Saints know how to get him the ball. He broke receiving record last year. I don't see him falling off the wagon, super hard, completely off of it like that, just 1 year removed from breaking all of those records. I said Devontae Adams had that 30% target share is actually Michael Thomas. I looked at the wrong note. 30% target share for Michael Thomas, which is incredibly high for anybody. Let alone one of the best receivers in the league, and in an offense that has Drew Brees still throwing him the ball and Sean Payton still calling the play. So yeah, I think you kind of have to put Michael Thomas as your number one until he falls off.
Question, not necessarily related to Michael Thomas, not related to what we were covering on this show really, but just popped in my mind. Mm-hmm. Where would you take Michael Thomas in a PPR league? Like, how many running backs would you take ahead of him?
You'll see Michael Thomas. I've seen him go as high as like the third overall pick after like McCaffrey and Barkley. I would take Zeke over him. If I'm sitting on like pick 5 or 6 and I walk away with Michael Thomas, I'm not going to be mad. I'm trying to think of like other running backs I would take.
Kamara?
That's tough. You're really banking on Kamara getting in the end zone this year for taking him over Thomas, especially in the PPR league. I'm a guy that values running backs a whole lot more than receivers. Yeah, I feel like probably like pick 7's the floor for Michael Thomas in the first round, because there's no way he slips past like pick 7 in like a first round for me in fantasy draft.
I think I'd take him 4.
See, I completely understand that. And like people, if they take him over Zeke, I kind of would understand that as well. It just depends on your team and what you're trying to accomplish with like the roster like construction. I wouldn't take him over Saquon. I wouldn't take him over McCaffrey. And then I feel like, pick number 3 where you start to entertain that like Zeke Michael Thomas debate. I feel like you start to see him go.
I have pick 3 in my draft on Saturday, and I'm like really debating because I don't know which way Stubbs picked right before me at 2, and I don't know which way he's going to go. Number 1's going to be McCaffrey, but
right.
If Stubbs goes Alvin Kamara, do I go with Saquon? Because I love Saquon as a player, but going through his schedule, I don't love the schedule this year. And that's why I put Kamara over Saquon when we did our running back rankings. And I'd be, especially in a full-point PPR league, I would have a little bit of a debate with myself if I go Michael Thomas or if I go Saquon Barkley.
Personally, I would go Saquon just because like he's going to get the touches next year. And if he stays healthy, like we all have to assume everybody is going into 2020, he's going to return putting up those crazy numbers. And he was hurt last year and he still put up decent numbers down, the end. But I wouldn't blame you if you put Thomas,
Yeah.
I
just keep going back to.
That's like the most important thing too, is like knowing who you draft with and kind of trying to like formulate a plan around that. Because like if you feel like you can get a solid running back at the turn at the end of round 2, early round 3, I wouldn't have a problem with you taking Thomas.
Yeah, I know the plan that I have in my mind that I would like to have play out, because ideally I'm rolling with that, that no wide receiver route that I've gone through. But like, it's dependent on the guys that are drafting with me. I can't pick for them. I can only pick for myself. So
right,
we'll see. But yeah, pick 3 is a tough spot. I feel like this year. I mean, that's kind of where. I mean, you could say the draft starts at pick number 2 because we know what 1's going to be. But I feel like for a lot of people, the draft starts at like 3 or 4 because they know what the top 2 or 3 are going to be.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk some tight ends. This to me is going to be more interesting than wide receivers.
Yep.
Because we know we talk about it all the time. You have like your top, in my opinion, it kind of cut down to like your top two really last year, because Zach Ertz was kind of part of like that top three going into last year. And then, Dallas Goedert took away some targets, and Ertz is, I don't want to say his stock like plummeted by any means, but it went down a little bit with the emergence of Dallas Goedert there. So my number 10, I feel like, the top sleeper at this position, they let go of their other tight end, their longtime tight end. Jonnu Smith in Tennessee is my tight end 10. I don't want to say that, like, obviously you have A.J. Brown there, so the passing game doesn't go through Jonnu Smith, but this is a great athlete at the position. I really like him. I liked him even going into last year. Anytime that Delanie Walker was sitting, this is a guy that I thought was a good streaming option for people. So, yeah, I'm pretty high on Jonnu Smith going into this year. I know it's a team that likes to go through the run game, but when they do pass, I feel like it's Jonnu Smith or it's A.J. Brown, and, that's why I think he warrants top 10 consideration.
So I wanted to put Jonnu in my 10th spot really, really bad, and I almost put him there. So I share the same sentiments as you. We've seen what Delanie Walker can do in Tennessee, and we saw what Jonnu Smith can do in Tennessee. For whatever reason, I feel like Tennessee tight ends are kind of like that position, like the go-to position for any quarterback playing there. He's an incredible athlete. When he gets thrown the ball, 9 times out of 10 he comes down with it. It's just incredibly productive for the small amount we've seen so far in his career. I have Mike Gesicki as my tight end 10. Actually, finished as tight end 11 last year, and a complete shit show of the Dolphins offense last year. Tua Tagovailoa comes into 2020. I think he's going to give a pretty decent passing boost to the Dolphins offense. If anything, they could be down 35-3 at the end of the third quarter. They're still going to be chucking the ball, getting that experience. And that's even if Tua starts week 1. There's still whispers of, I think Fitzpatrick might, retain that starting role heading into this year. But no, Mike Gesicki, he's a big tight end. Granted, he's a project still. There's a lot of work. He's still kind of raw, but finishing as tight end 11 last year and getting to as a quarterback was enough, at least for me at the tight end position, to slide him into that 10 spot.
Yeah, Yahoo has him ranked, I believe, at 10, just above Jonnu Smith. So, but yeah, I like Mike Gesicki as a player. I was going to ask you, because you mentioned about Tua, when do you think that we see him actually on the field? The lack of preseason games, he's kind of interesting, but from all accounts, he looked good in training camp.
Yeah, so I think there's two schools of thoughts when it comes to getting quarterbacks playing time. One is to have the quarterback sit, kind of learn. Don't throw him to the fire. Let him learn. Let him take in, the NFL speed, everything about the game. And then when you feel like he's ready, then kind of roll him out there. And the second line of thing is, hey, the only and best experience he's going to get is actual game experience. It doesn't matter if they're losing 40-0. You keep that kid in the game. Let him get as much experience as he can from actual live game. I think if you draft him that high in the draft, there's no way that you can sit him for more than 3 games. That's kind of expecting the Dolphins not to go 3-0 though. I just feel like Tua's way too talented of a guy to keep on the bench regardless. So I think Tua will end up starting the majority of the games for the Dolphins this year.
I hope so. He's fun to watch.
Yeah, he is.
But yeah, either way, I mean, you're either going to have a rookie quarterback, you have Ryan Fitzpatrick. I think that bodes well for Mike Gesicki stock. As you mentioned, showed flashes last year. My tight end number 9, a guy that showed flash toward the end of last year. We know the leaps that we can see second-year tight ends take. Noah Fant is my number 9 tight end. A guy in a Denver offense that should be very fun. A lot of it is on Drew Lock's shoulders, though. If he's good, that offense should be really good. A lot of young players on that offense. They got 2 running backs, Melvin Gordon, Philip Lindsay. They drafted Jerry Jeudy. They drafted KJ Hamler, who, just went down with an injury. We'll see how quickly he can get back onto the field. Cortland Sutton is there. Deshaun Hamilton is there, who their coach just spoke highly of, Vic Fangio. And then, of course, Noah Fant at the tight end position. So I really like this offense if Drew Lock is, what he showed he could be the second half of last year when he was handed the keys to the starting job. But yeah, Noah Fant's a guy that I expect to take a second-year leap, and I really like him in that offense.
Yeah, Noah Fant kind of came on at the end of 2019. Didn't have a great start to his rookie year last year, but he kind of came on. Yeah, I know. He showed what he can do down the stretch. I think he nailed it on the head. It's all dependent on Drew Lock. We'll see. There's a lot of mounts to defeat in Denver. You already listed them all. Melvin Gordon, Philip Lindsay are in the backfield as well. They're very ample of catching a couple of passes as well. So I wanted to put him in my top 10, but I feel like he was going to be number 10 or bust for me. I just felt like Gesicki provided a little bit more of an opportunity. Granted, I do think pound for pound, Noah Fant is the better player, just in terms of being a tight end. But both of those guys are still super young. But I think that kind of speaks to the disparity at the tight end position. If we're talking about these guys who average 4 or 5 fantasy points last year's like top 10 tight ends, it's crazy. Number 9 for me is going to be Blake Jarwin for the Dallas Cowboys. Jason Witten finished as tight end 12th last year, and there's a lot of hype surrounding Blake Jarwin heading to 2020. Now that he kind of has
Logan Bell.
Yep, shout out to Logan Bell. He has full reins over the tight end position for the Dallas Cowboys. We've already talked about how much Dallas's offense is going to improve this year. Granted, we can keep beating a dead horse. There's a lot of mouths to feed in Dallas, but Dak Prescott has shown that he can throw to tight ends early and often. I feel like Blake Jarwin's, he's an athletic enough guy to get it done. So I have a lot of confidence of him. I have a lot of confidence in Dallas's offense moving into 2020, and that's why I have him as my number 9 tight end.
Yeah, there's a couple guys I'll mention after that were just on the outside for me, but he was one of the guys I had just outside my top 10. My tight end 8, Hayden Hurst. We talked about, his role in Atlanta should be pretty similar to Austin Hooper. They're hyping him up there as to taking on that role. When they get down into the red zone, he could be the guy that they're looking for, potentially even over a guy like Julio Jones. But yeah, really never got to flourish in the Ravens offense. That system wasn't built for him. But if Atlanta's going to use this guy like they were using Austin Hooper, we saw the year that Austin Hooper had, and what Austin Hooper looked like when healthy in Atlanta. So I really like the opportunity that should be there for Hayden Hurst.
Yeah, so I have Hayden Hurst as my tight end 7, so I'll touch on him in a little bit. Jared Cook is going to be my tight end number 8. Finished as tight end 6 of last year, despite missing 2 full games. He could have potentially broke into the top 5 had he played another 2 games. Cook still plays in that New Orleans offense. Still got Drew Brees throwing him the football. I don't think he puts up crazy numbers. I don't think Jared Cook's going to have this big breakout year, but he should be a little bit more involved in the offense. And I think you mix that with kind of the lack of depth at the tight end position fantasy-wise. And I almost think he's the lock to at least be top 2. So he's my tight end 8, and I'll touch on Hayden Hurst as he's my tight end 7. Everything you just said, I feel like we saw what Austin Hooper did in Atlanta last year, and Hayden Hurst looked pretty darn good in Baltimore in 2019. So I fully expect him to replicate that success in Atlanta. There's going to be plenty of opportunity for him to do that, and yeah, he's my tight end 7.
Yeah. So somebody just came into the YouTube chat and said, their team is Mahomes, McCaffrey, Bell, Parker, Landry, Hooper, and Edelman. A 16-team league. 0.5 PPR.
Is there a trading that league? Because, oh my God.
Yeah, 16 teams. I mean, so I've done it once, and it's very tough because think about it. 2 running backs apiece, that's every starting running back in the NFL. And I know a lot of teams use more than 1 running back now. You see committees and stuff. Even quarterbacks, that's literally every starting quarterback rostered on these teams. Free agency has to suck, and it did suck when I did it. So I'm not a fan of 16-team leagues. With that being said, I don't think that you made out too bad looking at this team. I don't know what your bench looks like, obviously, but, most weeks you're going to have Mahomes, Christian McCaffrey, Bell, who his value dropped tremendously. I see him not even inside the top 15 running backs now. Parker, Landry, and Edelman as your receivers. If Devontae Parker can replicate what he did last year, he's definitely worthy of, borderline wide receiver 1, especially in the 16-team league, and then Austin Hooper, we'll see, if he's the guy that he was in Atlanta, in Cleveland. I just think that there's too many mouths to feed where I probably would lean towards him being more of a tight end 2. But again, I don't know where you took him. This is 16-team league. So, that if it was like a 10-team league, I don't know that I would have him as a tight end 1. I don't know that I would feel comfortable with him being my number 1 tight end, but in a 16-team league, that changes the scenario there a little bit.
Yeah, I feel like even like a 14 or like a 12-man league, even a 10-man league, like that'd still be like a pretty decent roster. But I would have to think that McCaffrey went in first round, then probably Mahomes, like late second, early third. I assume since he has McCaffrey, he had the number 1 pick, and that's how things can pan out. But that sounds like a phenomenal roster. I'd love to hear the bench.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if they're still in here, but if they are, yeah, you can hit us with that bench as well. You mentioned Hayden Hurst was your wide receiver, tight end 7, correct?
Yeah, correct.
Okay, so my tight end 7 this is purely based off talent because he really hasn't shown tight end top 10 tight end numbers to finish his year yet. Evan Ingram with the Giants. So I'm expecting a little bit of a leap from Daniel Jones. By the way, man, he added 10 to 15 pounds of muscle and it shows. He looks a lot bigger. Daniel Jones, that is, not Evan Ingram. But yeah, I expect the Giants offense to be a little bit better. Again, we mentioned with Saquon last week that they need to work on that offensive line. They did, fourth overall, drafting Andrew Thomas, a 3-year starter at left tackle at Georgia. So I like that move to protect Daniel Jones. Not that I'm a huge Daniel Jones guy, but year 2 for quarterbacks is very important. If he takes a little bit of a leap this year, that offense, not to say they're going to be, a top even half of the league offense, but, Saquon Barkley should open up that passing game a little bit more. Evan Ingram with the other guys there, Darius Slayton, Golden Tate, those other guys, Sterling Shepard. Evan Ingram, I don't know what kind of coverage he'll see, but I think he's able to win a lot of one-on-one matchups should they use a safety or a linebacker on him. And, I'm still a believer in Evan Ingram, even though we haven't fully seen it yet.
Yeah, I'm an Evan Ingram believer to the point where I have him in my top 5. Spoiler alert. I'm right there with you, so I'll touch on him a little bit later. Tight end 6 for me is going to be Zach Ertz, though, and I struggled with this a lot because you can talk to 10 different people about Zach Ertz, and you'll hear 10 different opinions on him. He missed one game last year, and he still finished as tight end 5, so I do think he drops down a little bit just in terms of what he did from last year to this year. And I just think that the talent is still there. Granted, Dallas Goedert's still there, and Dallas Goedert, I believe, finished as a top 10 tight end last year as well. And they have Jalen Reagor. Everybody should be healthy in the Eagles receiving core heading into 2020. So that I do think Zach Ertz's value, along with his age, because he is kind of getting up there in age as well. I do think that does diminish him, but he's still kind of the guy for Carson Wentz or any quarterback throwing in Philadelphia's offense. And I feel like Zach Ertz is probably one of the more reliable tight ends as he come whenever he's on the field. So tight end 6 for me. A bit of a dice roll. I completely understand if people don't have him there, if people have him higher, have him lower, wherever. He's kind of the wild card for me whenever we talk about tight ends heading the next year.
Yeah. We talked about not being able to, you shouldn't let health of a guy impact drafting him. Well, this guy's a premier case of that. Hunter Henry is my tight end 6. Really love the talent there when he is on the field. It's just about staying on the field. And maybe this year it's magnified because they're either going to have a rookie and Justin Herbert throwing the ball, where Tyrod Taylor, who, throws in the 10 to 15 yard range and not past it. So, the tight end is going to be a huge focal point of that offense. And if Hunter Henry's healthy, he's one of the premier tight ends in this league. And I don't see how he doesn't put up huge numbers in this offense should he stay healthy. He's on the franchise tag this year, so he's be playing for a contract. So just add that to the fuel to his fire. This is a guy that I expect a big year from.
Yeah, I don't have Hunter Henry in my top 10. I'm super scared to see what he looks like without Phillip Rivers. Whether it's Tyrod or Justin Herbert, I understand they're going to try to utilize the tight end position. I just want to see what he looks like. I want to see him play a full set of games. I'm kind of in a prove me wrong mode when it comes to Hunter Henry heading to 2020. Without a doubt, whenever he is healthy, I mean, the last couple of years when he's played, he's been as productive as Rob Gronkowski was in New England. And that just speaks volumes to the type of numbers he can fantasy. Tight end 5 for me is going to be Evan Ingram. You already touched on him. There's really no number 1 receiving option in the Giants receiving core. You have Darius Slayton there. I think they have one more guy. I'm forgetting their name off the top of my head, but there's really no immediate wide receiver 1 in New York for Daniel Jones to go to. And I think we've seen Evan Ingram creates a lot of matchup problems whenever he lines up close to the slot, lined up as receiver. When they do have a linebacker lined up on him, he's able to win those matchups more times than not. Super productive guy whenever he's healthy. He only played 8 games last year. He averaged 8.2 points per game in those 8 games, and he would have been tight end number 4 had he continued that trend all the way through a full season. So he's productive for sure. Like I said, Saquon could open up the passing game and should open up the passing game a little bit. But I just think as long as he's healthy, he's the guy. So I'm willing to just plant my flag on the Evan Ingram hill.
Yeah, for sure. My tight end 5, you kind of already talked about him. probably a little bit lower than most people have him. Zach Ertz is my tight end 5. I just think that, the passing game in Philadelphia, still kind of goes through him. He's Carson Wentz's guy. First option is going to be him in that passing game, in my opinion, still going into the year to start it at least. But we saw the emergence of Dallas Goedert. Jalen Reagor, we're hearing very good things about him coming out of Philadelphia's training camp. So it's going to be interesting to see. But I just feel like we're slowly starting to see Zach Ertz's role in that offense diminish a little bit, not super aggressively. But I still think it's a guy that, again, warrants top 5 consideration. It's just he's clearly not with the George Kittles and the Travis Kelce's of the world at this point.
Yeah. I'm right there with you. He was once upon a time considered one of the best tight ends in the NFL, and talent-wise, he's probably still up there. But just in terms of fantasy, he has dropped it a little bit, just because of all the reasons you named, and people emerging upwards. We should have the same top 4. Number 1 and number 2 for me can be flipped a little bit, just depending on your preference. Number 4, I have Darren Waller, Las Vegas Raiders tight end. Don't know where you have him, whether you have him at 3 or it's just incredibly talented.
I have a 1.
Shockwaves, yeah. No, he's one of 2 top 10 tight ends to play, all 16 games last year. And we could talk about this all day, but the best ability is availability. So having a guy you can plug in that lineup every week, and where you can draft him as well, because he doesn't carry the price tag that a tight end like Kittle or Kelce carries, or even like Mark Andrews. You're seeing Mark Andrews drafted fairly high as well. Darren Waller, despite Henry Ruggs being there, I still think he's the number 1 guy for Derek Carr. I think Derek Carr is going to have a little bit of a bounce back year in 2020. And with that being said, yeah, I think Darren Waller stayed inside the top 10, and I have him at number 4 this year.
Yeah, he's my number 4 too. Just as you could go back and forth with 1 and 2, I think the same could be said about 3 and 4. Yeah. Darren Waller, he's the most proven of the young pass catchers in Vegas. I think Derek Carr loves him. I'm super happy for Waller being able to get past, his past and being able to put it all together on the football field finally, because he's an athletic freak, one of the best athletes at the position. And regardless of how good the Raiders offense is, we saw that it wasn't that great last year. Say they take a leap this year, that only bodes well for a guy like Darren Waller in that offense. So yeah, I don't see how he would be any lower than 4. I even think that he at this point is a step above Zach Ertz, and that might be a hot take for a lot of people. But obviously we both are on the same page there, having him above Zach Ertz. But yeah, this is a guy that, if you want to talk specifically rounds, Kittle and Kelce are obviously going to be the first 2 to go, and they'll probably go, round 3-ish at the latest. I'm probably not taking Waller before like round 4, round 5. Like I'm not taking him the same round as those guys. But, I still think that if you get him on the roster, the drop-off isn't that great from one of those two top tight ends.
Yeah, you're still getting the same kind of production for a little bit lower of a cost. Granted, I don't think he offers quite the upside that a guy like Kittle or Kelce does. He's not the brand name toy that you exactly look for whenever you're shopping, but at the end of the day, he'll still get the job for you. So with that being said, my tight end 3 is Mark Andrews. Baltimore runs the ball a lot, like more than any other team, like by far. Like they love establishing the run, I understandably so, with all of the talented running backs they have, especially the one that's playing quarterback right now. But whenever they do decide to throw it, Mark Andrews is, I think without a doubt, Lamar Jackson's top option. Granted, we do expect to see Hollywood Brown kind of take the next step into 2020 and, emerge himself as, hit that next tier as he should, as, trying to become one of the better receivers in the league. Mark Andrews is about as safe as a safety blanket as you can get, though. The numbers speak for themselves. Uber productive. I feel like if Lamar is not throwing the ball to Hollywood, he's just throwing it to Mark Andrews. I feel like those are basically the only 2 options in Baltimore for him. I could talk blue in the face all day, but Andrews, he doesn't. I was gonna say he doesn't give you like the like, oh, like Patrick Mahomes is gonna throw the ball 40 times a game, so he should see X amount of targets. It's not really about the targets for him. It's just that whenever the ball is thrown to him, he catches it and he makes the most out of it, especially in the red zone as well.
Yeah, you mentioned the word safe, and that's the first. It's just consistency on a week-to-week basis, knowing that you're going to get top 5 production from the position, in a position that's so volatile. Like every single week, 6 through 10 could be a different guy, but who's going to be at the top. He's one of those guys that's going to be at the top. So it's a safe pick. But at the same time, that's not a bad thing, especially at the tight end position when it comes to fantasy. So Mark Andrews, a guy I think every single week will give you top 5 production, and I have him as my number 3 as well for every reason that you just mentioned. Through him, the emergence of a second-year Hollywood Brown, I don't think has too much of an impact on his target share there in Baltimore. I still think that he's going to be Lamar Jackson's guy, especially in the red zone. Maybe we see a little bit of an uptick in touchdowns, even if we see a little bit of regression in targets. So I don't know, but we'll see. But yeah, 1 and 2 were going to be who they are regardless. So again, who are 3 and 4 going to be, and we had the same going with Andrews at 3 and Waller at 4. Again, both guys that I think there's not a huge drop off from 1 and 2. They don't offer that same boom as those guys. Very safe, consistent pass catchers though.
Definitely, yeah. Like I said, they're not name brand. They're not the first names whenever they come to your mind when you think about the tight end position. But at the end of the day, they still do get the job done. I'm curious though, so what order you have number 1 and number 2? So who's your tight end 2?
Travis Kelce.
Yeah, same.
So only reason here is because of Tyreek Hill's presence in Kansas City, and Mecole Hardman year 2. I think that Kittle is just a little bit more of a piece, if you will. Like their passing game goes more through Kittle than Kansas City's does through Kelce, in my opinion. I mean, don't get me wrong. I would love to have either one of them on my rosters this year. It can easily go either way. But for me, Kelce's number 2, just because I have Tyreek Hill inside my top 3. Obviously, I expect him to be the driving force of that passing game there. And both just got 2 huge new contracts, both those guys. So, yeah, I have Kelce at 2 and Kittle at 1. I'll finish up, and then you can talk about why you have the order that you do. So Kittle at 1 for me, just because, like I said, that passing game goes through him. San Francisco's offense, which is primarily play action, run. We saw in the NFC Championship they only threw the ball 8 times. Jimmy Garoppolo was 6 of 8 passing. But yeah, when they do throw the ball to Kittle, he's a guy that is a sneaky, very good athlete. I mean, he can do it all. He's the best blocking tight end, and at worst, he's the second best catching tight end. So for me, he's the best tight end in football. And I think from a fantasy perspective, just the opportunity, who knows how long that this injury is going to linger, why did I just forget his name as I was about to talk about him? Deebo Samuel, in that offense. And I'm not sure who the primary pass catcher is, if it's not Kittle there. So for me, Kittle's number 1.
Yeah, 1A, 1B for me. I will entertain arguments for Travis Kelce being tight end 1 all day. I completely understand if Kelce goes before Kittle. I understand if Kittle goes before Kelce. It's kind of rotational as far as those guys go. I just think Kittle provides a little bit more of a opportunity when it comes to fantasy football tight ends. You have Deebo Samuel there, and then you have a first-year Brandon Ayuk, who actually just got hurt yesterday. You have one of the other receivers just got hurt and was out for the season. I forgot who it was. It's not Dante Pettis. It's going to be somebody else in that 49ers receiving core. I'll think of him later.
Oh, the other guy I just thought of. It's not the one that got hurt, I don't think, but Kendrick Bourne as well.
Kendrick Bourne is there. Yep.
I
just feel like as far as San Francisco goes, there's a lot more game scripting to get George Kittle the ball. Yet Kyle Shanahan's one of the most creative play callers I've seen in quite a long time. He does a very good job getting George Kittle the ball. He's super efficient whenever it comes to both blocking and catching. So Kittle for me is just a little bit more involved in the game plan. That's just due to Kansas City having just a bunch more weapons. They have Tyreek Hill, they have Mecole Hardman, they have a Patrick Mahomes that could throw it to anybody. They have CEH now. So I just think Kittle gives me a little bit more of that opportunity week in, week out, and I think he's a bigger part of the game plan. So that's why he's my tight end 1.
Okay. Yeah, we got a couple questions here to answer as we wrap this up. Somebody came in and said thoughts on Austin Hooper. Austin Hooper, fantastic in Atlanta. The thing with us is, we don't want to really question the ability. A lot of people I know are questioning the ability, thinking he's a system guy in Atlanta. At least for me, I just think it's more about how many mouths there are to feed in that Cleveland offense, and thinking he's a guy that could be just, left out enough where he doesn't finish inside the top 10. I would probably have him, 12 or 13 on my list if we were doing that far down. Even at the tight end position, David Njoku no longer requested a trade. He's going to be there. So, it's just too in the air for me what his role is going to be in that offense. They paid him, so you think that they're going to use him. But again, for me, that passing game goes through OBJ, so I got to see it to believe it as far as him having a big role in that offense.
Yeah, if we were talking about Austin Hooper in Atlanta, I would be all over him. He produced great numbers last year. But him going into Cleveland, him being probably what we're looking at is a best as like a number 3 option behind Odell and behind Jarvis Landry. That's not super bad. You're really banking on Baker Mayfield to like turn it up to new levels we've never seen him hit in the NFL. David Njoku is still there in the tight end room, which doesn't concern me because I still think Austin Hooper is a tight end 1 in Cleveland. But having his presence there isn't necessarily a great reassuring thing, just in terms of him getting all the opportunities and numbers that he should. So, great player, not a perfect fit for him, just in terms of scheme. I think he went there for money and not to be a big part of the offense. And to win championships, they gave him a fat deal. And yeah, I think Austin Hooper, if he's your like tight end 1 and maybe like a 10 or 12 man league, that's kind of a dice roll. But I mean, he's talented for sure. You can't deny that. It's just a matter of how Cleveland's offense picks up and going into 2020, whether Baker takes that next step.
Right. I mean, I think that the ceiling, if he is the same player as he was in Atlanta again, probably a guy that we have inside our top 7. But we just don't know that that's going to be the case. And, we haven't seen Cleveland be able to feed, OBJ didn't finish the wide receiver 1 last year. We haven't seen them produce a pass catching number 1 with Baker Mayfield as the quarterback. So until we see that, it's just hard to put him and say he finishes inside the top 10. If you're in like a 14-man lead, or we got a question about somebody who's in a 16-man lead with Austin Hooper as their tight end, that's fine. I would definitely live with that. If you get him in a 12-man league, again, he probably would have finished just outside my top 12, and he finished outside my top 10. So there's 10 guys that I would pick before him. But hey, if he produces like he did in Atlanta, he's definitely going to warrant that consideration. So, and the other thing was Stubbs came in here. He mentioned that he had the number 2 pick. So obviously he's not asking my opinion on this because I pick right behind him. So I'm not going to answer this. But he wants to know what direction he should go with pick number 2.
Man, I just feel like is your guys' league a PPR league?
It is full point. Yeah.
I think at that point you're drafting for ceilings, and I think PPR league wise, like Saquon's probably the better option as compared to like a guy like Zeke or a guy like Michael Thomas. Both just like running and passing through the air. There's a ton of opportunity for Saquon. We've seen him do it before. And even I said this earlier in the show, but even last year, whenever he was, injury stricken, he still somewhat produced. He came big for fantasy owners in the playoffs last year and championship game in particularly. Like I said, you're at number 2. You're drafting for ceiling. You're drafting for overall talent. I think you take Saquon at 2, and you're super happy about it. You're super psyched.
So he's mentioning Aaron Jones. I think 2 is too high for him.
Trade back.
Yeah, I mean, you could potentially do that. Aaron Jones, you had him inside your top 10. I had him just outside, and it's just because, I feel like – so he's in a contract year, which, Green Bay should, want to run the tires off him, get everything out of him, and then move on to A.J. Dillon, which should bode well for his fantasy value this year. But at the same time, I also see them kind of transitioning to A.J. Dillon. Maybe he takes some work away in the red zone as well. I don't know. It's a fluid situation. I'd still feel, I obviously would love to have Aaron Jones on my roster. I think 2 is too high for me. I would probably consider him no higher than like 8.
Yeah, I am not taking Aaron Jones at the number 2 overall pick. I would rather take a guy like Zeke or Michael Thomas or even like Julio before I entertain a guy like Aaron Jones. Granted, he is supposed to be force-fed the ball. Granted, he might not have the goal line carries that we saw last year. Just because A.J. Dillon's presence in that backfield. I think he'll be productive this year. Not number 2 overall pick productive. Do you guys have like trading for like draft picks in the league? Or?
I mean, we can, but there wouldn't be, it's not a dynasty league or anything like that. Or so we redraft every single year. There wouldn't be. You would just be doing it because you want to have like a pick more towards the middle to get 2, good players as opposed to like one premier and then one, like decent, I guess. So you
if Stubbs can find a buyer for number 2 and kind of slide down to the end of the first, I think he can easily grab the guy he wants if he really does want Aaron Jones, and he could recoup some draft picks as well, some like pretty high ones at that.
Okay, so the person that asked about Hooper,
Mhm.
Kittle's his number one tight end anyway. So Hooper's his backup. So he's just hoping that he has a great year to start and then can use him as a trade piece. And he's also saying he's
Jeez,
still
man.
worth a bench spot, say around say week 4. I mean, so is this a dynasty or keeper league? I mean, I definitely think that that's going to be his backfield sooner rather than later. They spent a second round pick on him, as I mentioned. Aaron Jones did contract year. I think this is his last year in Green Bay before transitioning to him. As far as this year goes, I'm not sure what his workload is going to look like, just because, as we're mentioning, when running backs are in contract year, that's typically the year teams will run the tires off of this guy. Um, so barring an Aaron Jones injury, I'd probably say he's just a handcuff at this point. If you have Aaron Jones, it's probably not a bad idea to take him to handcuff to him, but I don't think he has any real standalone value to start the season, especially being a rookie with this weird offseason, not really getting to play in the preseason at all, and really just having to just go from training camp straight into a regular season game.
Yeah, I just feel like AJ Dillon for me, fantasy wise, at least this year, not a whole lot going on for him unless a guy like Aaron Jones gets hurt. And in that case, I think his value and his production obviously would shoot up from there. Just not a whole lot of stuff he can do in that Green Bay backfield. And granted, it does look like the Packers are shifting more towards a balanced offense, and just instead of Rodgers throwing 40 or 50 times a game. But at least for me, Aaron Jones is still the guy in 2020, regardless. So I think that means a minimal time for AJ Dillon right now. But I think in the future, they would much rather not pay a guy like Aaron Jones and rely on AJ Dillon and probably like another feature back.
Yeah, again, that's kind of the way that the league is trending. Can
Yeah.
Aaron Jones do it all? Exactly, but are you going to pay him, $10 million to do it, or are you going to get two guys on rookie deals? One that's going to be the power back, goal line guy, can run the ball first and second down, and then add, a third down receiving back to that dynamic, and you're going to pay them less than, a third of what Aaron Jones is going to make in free agency. It's just the way
Right.
that the league is trending, and teams are getting smart about it. They know how to utilize their backfield. They'd rather have a couple guys do what one guy could do, because that one guy's going to be making way more money than they want to shell out to the position. It's just the way it is.
Right.
But I do agree. Again, I don't think that AJ Dillon comes into this year with a ton of standalone value. But I would say that looking at that Green Bay offense, as we mentioned, just one really like premium pass catcher. I do think should Aaron Jones go down, AJ Dillon is right there as like RB2 consideration.
Definitely, yeah, and we'll see if they keep Jamal Williams in that backfield as well, because
Yeah.
AJ Dillon isn't necessarily a great like pass catcher for me. He's definitely more of like an inside the tackles, traditional north and south runner.
Those legs, though, man.
Oh, dude, yeah, and like should he get the opportunity in Green Bay to get 20, 25 carries a game this year, I think he would thrive.
Yeah, it's kind of like a cliche, but it's the truth. Like a running back like that, as the game goes on, he's just like that much more imposing on defense. It's like they just get tired from tackling him. Like that's how hard
Definitely, yeah.
it's almost like a Derrick Henry type situation. But yeah, he's a massively built running back, and I really didn't realize that until that picture was put up, that showing those tree trunks that he has for legs. But yeah, definitely a situation to monitor. There's a lot of running back situations to monitor. So many free agents after this year, and it'll be interesting to see, will the teams run the tires off of these guys, or will they try to incorporate the guy that we expect to be the next running back? So again, I think that AJ Dillon's probably right up there as one of the better handcuffs in the league. So that wouldn't be a bad idea to start. And I keep repeating myself, but don't think there's a ton of standalone value to start the season. But should Aaron Jones go down, I think that this is a guy that warrants RB2 consideration. So we'll leave it at that. Other than that, Donnie, do you have anything else?
I don't know. Pretty solid episode, man.
Yeah, a lot of good stuff. Thanks everybody for watching and giving us those questions here towards the end. If you're listening back, regardless of what platform it is on, you can come over to the YouTube page, youtube.com/c/around the 412. Hit the subscribe button and notification bell so you know when we go live for the fantasy show or the regular show. Get involved, chat with us, do it all. Again, make sure you're subscribed, hit that notification bell, leave a comment, like it, comment, let us know what you want to hear us talk about, tweet at us. Our names are right here. You can find our Twitters or at around the 412. Tweet at us and let us know what you want to hear us talk about. We'll be back next week. Other than that, it's been around the 412, sponsored by Keith Barbershop an old-fashioned barbershop located at 180 Brighton Avenue in Rochester, PA. He's open 11 to 7 Tuesday through Friday and 9 to 4 on Saturday. Every Tuesday, he does $5 off for military personnel, first responders, and nurses. Again, that's Keats Barbershop. It's been Smitty. It's been Donnie. The Around the 4-2 Fantasy Football Podcast. We'll talk to you next week. Bye-bye.